Hey, everybody, welcome back or welcome to The Growth Project, a podcast by AMPLOS. My name is Cory Shaffer, and I am excited for this episode. You are going to hear from Paul Davis, the Director of Pitching Development for the Atlanta Braves. Some of the themes that we're going to hit here over the course of our conversation, just Paul's pivot from his professional life and one pathway he was headed down to getting into professional baseball. We'll talk a little bit about his philosophy towards pitching development, how to blend the art and science of coaching and of pitching. And we'll talk a little bit about what it takes to develop young talent, raw talent, into a championship big league pitcher. And we'll end with a little conversation around the future of pitching development. So Paul's a wealth of knowledge, great guy. And I think you guys will hear a lot that you can apply to your own life here in the episode. So enjoy the episode. Here's Paul Davis of the Atlanta Braves. All right, Paul, thanks for joining me, man. Looking forward to the conversation. Let's go ahead and just dive right in. So I guess what I'm interested in as a starting point is just your path from essentially playing, right? Your playing career as a pitcher yourself once upon a time. Is that correct?
Yep.
And then the transition into coaching. Was there some sort of a defining moment or an influence from a coach in your life that kind of sparked that transition, or was coaching just always something you knew you wanted to do?
I think in the back of my mind, I probably always wanted to do it. Probably because I'm very much a strategic thinker, and in playing games, I grew up playing games and whatever it was, and I was a good athlete, in a small town kind of sense, and so I just gravitated to thinking about strategically how to win games. And then I was very fortunate that I had a really good basketball coach who came in my senior year of high school, and he ended up being a Hall of Fame coach in the state of Florida. He'd already had a Hall of Fame career in Indiana basketball. um, but I look back and even though I was very I didn't have much understanding of basketball, but I look back at a lot of the things that I did learn from him. I had a really good junior college baseball coach that I went to a Division I school my freshman year, wasn't the right place. I went to a junior college, and a lot of things that I've ended up doing in coaching, just, my overarching philosophy and, how I kind of view baseball came from him. So I was very fortunate. And then, when I was in college, I probably thought, hey, I want to try and play professional baseball. And if that doesn't work, then, I'll try and coach. My path detoured a little bit from that. I ended up right out, and I had a lot of shoulder problems as a pitcher. And so that kind of drove me later with some things. But I did coach some like summer high school stuff. And this is, I graduated from college in 1985, so long time ago. But I worked in the business world, in the insurance and investing business for 5, 6, 7 years or so, and coached some younger kids, kind of the nascent travel ball days. Coached 11 to 14-year-olds for a few years, and then I got an opportunity to be a small college, a little NAIA school head coach, and did that for 5 years. Then went back to school, got my master's degree, was working on a PhD in leadership, and then taught in college for a few years, still kind of keeping my hand in coaching younger kids. And then late 2012 got hired by the Cardinals. So 2013 was my first season in professional baseball.
Okay. And you've been, in various roles since then. I know you had a decent little stint with the Cardinals, some time with the Mariners.
Yeah.
And what year did you start with the Braves?
2020. So this is my 6th year. I spent 6 with the Cardinals, 1 with the Mariners, and now 6 with the Braves.
Okay. So I want to pick up there anyway. So I'm glad we got that, to this point. For our listeners who might not know, just tell us a little bit about your role. So, the director of pitching development for the Atlanta Braves, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
So I'm overseeing all of our minor league pitchers and coaches. So communicating with the front office, primarily my direct boss Ben Sistanovich, who's assistant general manager and oversees player development. Communicating with pitching coaches, and some of our analysts, guys who are providing support on different things. And so once a guy gets into the organization, you have somewhat of a longer term plan for that pitcher. And there's so many things that we can know now about velocity, how that works in the major leagues. Um, okay, here's how he throws. Here's where his arm slot is. So a certain type of slider may work best, or he already has a really good changeup, or he has a good splitter. We have with most guys, we have some information about what their command, their ability to throw strikes looked like as an amateur. And so you start formulating a plan. Well, to get this guy to turn him into a major league pitcher, here's what we're going to have to do. Here's where his strengths are. Here's where his weaknesses are. It's almost like doing, I do basically a mini SWOT analysis, if you will. Just, and we'll have conversations, and I'm communicating with my assistant, his title is pitching coordinator, almost daily. That both of us are kind of looking at. This morning I already looked at game reports from last night, and I'd already kind of followed the games to see, okay, our starters, we had several guys who were priority guys, if you will, that started, and what did their games look like? How did they do? And so it's just kind of a 30,000 foot view in some ways, but then it's down on the ground with that guy. And then I travel to each of our affiliates, and typically I'm trying to make them shorter stays at this point. Our coaches, I think we're very fortunate that our pitching coaches are really good. Several of them have been with us for multiple years now, so they understand what my philosophy has been on what we need to do. So that's kind of what my role entails.
No, that's great. That's great. And I want to get into different elements of what you talked about. So you just mentioned there, what are some of the core principles or philosophies that kind of guide how you develop pitchers? And again, we'll talk more about this as we go too, but I think it's really important. Like, you're not just trying to make a pitcher in single A better. You're trying to develop him into a Major League Baseball pitcher. Like, that's a really important distinction here. But what are some of the core principles that you try to live by?
Well, I would even add, I didn't say this, but and we make no bones about this when guys enter the organization. And 2 weeks ago, we had guys that came to the complex, newly drafted, newly signed guys. We tell them we're trying to develop you into a championship pitcher, because the Atlanta Braves are trying to win a World Series. Again, that's our goal. And there's even a difference between a championship pitcher versus the everyday run-of-the-mill major league pitcher. So that's our overarching thing. And so the philosophy is really there is some game theory involved, because as I like to express to our pitchers, everything, things haven't changed in baseball for 150 years. Okay, it's still 3 strikes, you're out, 4 balls, you take a walk. Hitters are trying to hit the ball hard, do damage, or trying to score runs. The strike zone is the key driver of that, and the strike zone has changed in Major League Baseball primarily because of technology, that when a fan watches a game and you see that box that they can superimpose on the TV screen. Umpires are being graded. They've been graded for the last 10 or so years. And so, just like in the NFL, you see replays and the nose of the ball has to cross the line. In Major League Baseball, umpires are getting much better that a pitch has to actually be a strike for them to call it a strike. And so that really informs what do we need to do. We know that if you start off an at bat with an 0-1 count with strike one versus if you throw a ball and it starts 1-0, there is a huge difference in the outcome. That 1-0, the hitter's probably going to perform several hundred points better of OPS, and vice versa. 1-1, if we can get the count to 1-2 versus 2-1, there's a massive difference. There's a massive difference in strikeout rate, 1-2 versus 2-1, and walk rate. And so we will evaluate pitchers really on three things. It's their walk rate, their strikeout rate, and you could call it contact, whether they produce ground balls or, our guys doing a lot of damage, a lot of slug against them. And so, we're very upfront with guys that this is what we're trying to drive. And, and then you can take some of these numbers and you can look at the team level in the major leagues, and the teams that become championship teams are performing very well on these metrics. Mm-hmm. So macro and micro levels, it adds up.
So how many players across all levels are you sort of working with or are under your sort of supervision over the course of a season? And how do you keep tabs on all of them? I know you mentioned you wake up and you're just looking through probably game reports and box scores to a degree, like I might be, right? Looking at the guys that I work with. So yeah, how many players though? And what's the communication like, and how often are you checking in with these guys?
So it's roughly 100. And we have a team in the Dominican that these are youngest players in the organization, kids who come from primarily the Caribbean, international. They can sign a contract when they're 16 years old. So then they go to the Dominican Republic, and every team has what we call an academy there. It's essentially a dorm, and these guys, they live there and they play baseball for 7-8 months out of the year. And so we have around 20 pitchers there. Then you have a rookie league team that will play at your spring training complex, whether it's Florida or Arizona. And we'll have probably, 15-ish or so pitchers that are there. And then you may have, always, you're going to have a group of 6, 10, 12 pitchers that are injured. And so they're rehabbing and they're there at the complex. And then in A-ball are two A-ball teams in Augusta and Rome. They'll have anywhere from 15 to 17 pitchers. And then AA will usually be around 15. And then AAA is going to be the same. So, yeah, it's 100, give or take. And, I've got my spreadsheet that here's where everybody is, and, kind of keeping track of performance. We also, like every team, we have an internal database. This is one thing that has changed dramatically with technology, that every team has, an army of web developers and data systems people who can create a system that takes all of this information, because it's all linked up. And so every night, the numbers from the box score go in, and even on a granular level, when they throw a pitch, so we have systems and cameras in the stadiums that capture the movement, the velocity, the outcome of pitches, the location where they are, cameras that are capturing how they're moving from multiple angles. So I can go in and I can pull up this video and look at various things that we're trying to work on. Um, and then as far as with the pitchers, yeah, certainly, and guys know this, that there is somewhat of a pecking order. The higher you're drafted, the more of a priority you would typically be. And so, those guys, and most of our guys, I try to tend to give them some space, if you will. Um, I'll text guys occasionally that whether it's, you know, trying to just give them good feedback or check in, how you doing, great outing, or here's, I just saw them, hey, we were working on this, you're making strides in this, etc. A lot of it is checking in with our coaches who are with guys on a daily basis. um, they're playing 6 games a week and traveling throughout the Southeast, and I'm just going in a circle uh, around the system. And so more of my communication is with the coaches and even some of our support guys who they have access, they can see these things, and I can check in with them. I can't, it would be impossible to keep track and to really dig down on 100+ guys. I know a lot, certainly. I know every guy, and what, again, what their strengths, weaknesses, what are we trying to improve, all of that. But I have to have a tremendous amount of support to do what I do.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of what I was gonna hit on here next, at least briefly. I mean, this is not just like you and the athlete himself. This is the pitching coach and coordinators, potentially strength coaches, or
Mm-hmm.
kind of medical people involved, analysts, front office, sort of everybody involved is not just this, this two-way street between you and the player, right? Like there's a team behind all of this. So how do you keep everybody on the same page about the path, the developmental path of that player?
Well, I would look back when I first got here with the Braves, that having a background in organizational psychology and leadership. One of the things that, when I got a chance to talk to the guys who interviewed me, Ben and Mike Fast, who's a vice president, and I said my vision for a role like I'm in is to, and with a major league team, and I hadn't really had this opportunity yet, but to create a learning organization where we're constantly, as a group, we're trying to get better and to learn that there are a lot of things that as I mentioned in baseball, that provide this opportunity now. And we've evolved since I've been here in 6 years. We've done some good things, and we've gotten a lot of pitchers to the major leagues, and we won a World Series in 2021. We're still continuing to learn things. The game evolves. The outsider may not see how some of these things have evolved, but they have. Um, and so, we have to constantly try to evolve with the game. Some of it is, maybe in some ways, make our own little evolutions, but yet back to those guiding principles. The game, 3 strikes, 4 balls, the strike zone, that has not changed. And
Yeah.
so here's how we're going to approach this. And so I've had, a lot of support from our front office, from the people I report to, about, yes, this is basically our overarching philosophy. I can sum it up really in 2 small sentences. We're trying to make hitters swing and make hitters miss. That's what we're trying to do. And again, we can drill down and there's tentacles to that, but in a nutshell, we're trying to make hitters swing the bat, and when they do swing, we want them to miss.
Mhm. Okay. So, and you've touched on this a couple different times, but pitching development today, you've got the advanced analytics, you've got biomechanics, technology, all this stuff is involved. How do you balance all of that science with sort of the art of coaching, the psychology, the human side of the game?
That is a really key element, and I think sometimes it can be overlooked because again we have all this information, and if there wasn't a name attached to it, I could go into our system and I could see, okay, here's the pitch movement, here's what the fastball does. Okay, the changeup. Oh, if we tweak this, and we can make the changeup do this, we know it's going to get X% more swing and miss. And at times, you have to really remember that we're not playing a video game. That there are real people with real problems, frailties, confidence, lack of confidence that are behind that. And playing sports at the elite level that they're playing at is really difficult. And I make it a point anytime we have new guys. I said to these 17 new pitchers that we had, I never played professional baseball. I had the same dream. I wanted to play professional baseball, and I was like, every other guy who's probably, playing in high school and college, that, if you love the game, you watch a major league game, you want to be one of those guys. But I wasn't good enough. So, um, I try to keep that in mind. These guys are really good, and we're asking them, and I semi-jokingly at times, tell them what I'm asking them to do is like trying to ask them to climb Mount Everest. There's only a few people that are going to reach the peak,
Mhm.
and it's fraught with danger. Um, some people, aren't going to make it because they have to tap out. It's too difficult. Um, so, I try to keep that in mind as to just how difficult it is without, even excluding the other things that, yes, they're real people. All of these guys are 18 to 25, 30-year-old guys who have the same things that they're dealing with that any other 18 to 32-year-old male would deal with relationships and family and culture, and just a, a lot of, there can be distractions, if you will. um, Not how many 18 to 32-year-olds perform their job under the microscope of social media, national television. uh, you know you perform well or not well, and it's on Sports Center tomorrow morning.
Right.
That's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys also, they're extremely competitive, and this is what they want to do. But everybody else, the other side, the hitters and the other teams, they're competitive also. um, I tell guys, to try to be realistic. I think this is one of the things that, um, I'm curious to get your take on this too. And I don't remember if we've talked about this or not, but I will tell guys, hey, you just need to be a 9-7 pitcher. Okay, if you're 9-7 in the major leagues, and if every guy on our team was 9-7, we win 90 games,
Mhm.
and we're going to be in the playoffs. And we've done this really well at the major league level, and now we're seeing this year, for whatever reasons, it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
That line between winning and losing, the line between a 9-7 90-win team, 7-9 70-win team, is really fine.
Mhm.
And so, my job, and a lot of the things we talk about with guys, that they don't get to face Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Lindor, Alonso, Harper, Schwarber. They don't get to face those guys until they actually face them.
Mhm.
So we can prepare them as best as possible when they're in the minor leagues, and hopefully they get to AAA. But even there, they're not going to face those guys. And those games, they're not on the ESPN Sunday night game of the week or Sports Center. So that's a whole new level
Yeah.
of things they have to deal with.
So for all the pitchers then that you've worked with just over time, and this goes across, I guess, your career at this point, um, what do you feel like are some of the separating factors from the ones who thrive and who will get there, and not just get there, but as you said, maybe be a championship caliber pitcher, and the ones who struggle, maybe despite the fact that, like, man, they've got some nasty stuff and the metrics are there, they can throw the ball hard, this and that, but they can't quite all or seem to put it together consistently. What are some of the separators?
Well, I think competitiveness is a really big separator. And that's one I would throw this into, the if you were to look at a values circumplex, okay, some of Shalom Schwartz, okay, and the work that he did on values, and or you look at McClelland, power values, achievement values, the level that some of the guys that get to the peak, their competitiveness is just off the charts. And I think you have to differentiate that it's not just a maniacal, unhealthy need to win, but when you're playing at a level like that where everyone is so good and the stakes are so high, you also have to be very self-aware and understand, okay, what do I need to do to make some adjustments? Or, I didn't win today. Okay, why didn't I win? Sometimes you didn't win in the major leagues when you were great. You did everything you could. You performed at an unbelievably high level, but the hitters just, one or two pitches, or you made a great pitch. And it brings to mind that Spencer gave up a home run to Rafael Devers
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
The ball was 6 inches off the ground. It was a breaking ball that he reached out with one arm and hits the ball that's 6 inches off the ground and hits it into the seats. There's nothing you can do about that. And
That's just a tip of the cap. Like, man,
exactly.
you're the best in the world at what you do too, right? And sometimes you're going to win out.
Right. And that's one of the things that I think the best guys, they're able to understand that also,
Mhm.
and not let it, you hear all the time about, well, closers have to have a short memory. I think the best players in Major League Baseball, a lot of them will have to have a short memory, because you're just not going to win all the time. It's the same as, I love golf. I love to play golf. I watch golf. You could go out and shoot. And in fact, in the British Open, some players, were just alluding to this, that Scheffler is on a different level, that you have guys, Rory McIlroy is unbelievable. But yet here's this other guy who's playing at an even higher level.
Mhm.
And I think that happens at the elite, the pinnacle of sport, whatever you are, and you have to be willing to accept that. Um, but the flip side is sometimes you have to be willing to understand, okay, this is a shortcoming. I'm going to have to get better,
Mhm.
and you do that, and you've got to really, those guys. One other thing I think is they have an extremely high level of focus, whether it's the work that they do to prepare, to recover, but also, it's that ability when they're performing to, completely lock in and, for lack of a better term, they're in the zone. They're able to get in the zone at an extremely high level. I'm not sure if it's coachable, teachable. I do to an extent. I do think there are some things, that we know about attention and how to train attention, but there's other factors involved, and you've worked with a lot of guys who have performed at really high levels, and I'm curious your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that you can. I mean, part of me feels like, hey, I wouldn't have a job if we didn't feel like we could train that focus and improve it and get it better. You mentioned Spencer, and he's a good example of a guy who, when I first met him, was pretty stubborn. Kind of thought he had it all figured out, and he's a smart dude and analytical, and in some ways he did, but what he couldn't grasp is he could be really focused, and then the second something went wrong or went against him, how quickly he would lose that focus. Like he had the inability, as you described early on, to almost resist and not accept the fact that, like, hey, you threw a good pitch and it still got hit. That's just a part of the game.
Yeah.
And so that poor result would now impact his ability to just be focused on executing the next pitch, for example. And then how quickly things could spiral. And you see that a lot, even still in Major League Baseball. I see that every day, I feel like, right?
Right. And that is, I will say, when I was a young college coach, I was exposed to Ken Ravizza and Ken's book. And I used his book, you know, Heads Up Baseball, and the mantra, one pitch at a time. And I still use that all the time.
Mhm.
That, we will do exercises with pitchers in a side session, especially a lot of our younger guys, where, they'll throw a pitch and I make them step off the mound. Now you get back on. Okay, it's that pitch is over. You got to execute this pitch.
Mhm.
And that is something that guys have to be able to do.
Yep.
And I think the best guys are able to do that and stay in the moment, make one pitch at a time.
Right. So it's like the results of the game cannot negatively impact, let's say, that competitiveness that you said needs to be there. It can't necessarily make you want to dig your heels in and just try harder and sort of overdo things in your world. Like now you're trying too hard to throw the ball by the guy. You're trying to make your stuff nastier than it needs to be. You know what I mean? So it's almost like they double down on the
Yeah,
competitiveness, but it's like that's not the answer. You just need to stay level. You need to stay consistent. You treat the next pitch just like the last one. You don't have to do anything more. So yeah, all of that stuff I would assume is involved in this process and what you're trying to get these guys to develop over the time you have with them, right? And then by the time they get to the major leagues, you hope it's all there for them.
there's still things that, once when they get to the major leagues, okay, now it's a different level of hitter
Mm.
that they're facing,
Yep.
and so they're going to have to make some adjustments and learn again. I think that's where trying to stay in the moment, one pitch at a time, and just execute each pitch. And there's a big element of trust, that they have to trust themselves, trust that they're good enough, their stuff is good enough. Trust that yes, if I make this pitch, the results will happen. And it's not a sometimes, as you just alluded to, you make a good pitch and it gets hit. But if you make those good pitches often enough, the results are going to be in your favor.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing that I try to I try to get guys to understand is, this isn't, if you throw it here, oh, the hitter is absolutely going to miss it. No, that won't happen. But more often than not, you know,
Yeah.
um, and I do, one of the things I really try to do a lot of, and we try to do this throughout the system, is we want to emphasize guys' strengths and develop those strengths. I'm a huge believer. I was exposed to the Gallup Strengths Finder and did a lot of positive psychology work when I was a grad student, and focusing on strengths, what people do well, and let's and sometimes, and it's really about talent. Everyone, and I stress this to guys, everyone that walks in the door to they sign a contract with the Atlanta Braves, they're an elite talent. They're way over on the bell curve.
Mhm.
um, but now we're trying to take that talent and hone it into a strength so that they can become even more elite and get farther out on the bell curve, which is really difficult.
We kind of touched on this in the opening, but um in my observation, and I've been working with guys now for a number of years, one of the challenges of somebody in your role is to get these young players, okay, as you described, most of them, especially really early guys, so fresh out of high school, fresh out of college, um, to buy into changes and changes that are about their long-term growth. Like it's not about necessarily today or the next month or two, but we're talking about maybe years down the line. Um, to make them just better, to make them more well-rounded, to turn them into, as you said, a championship caliber Major League Baseball pitcher. Um, that sometimes comes at the sacrifice of what feels good for players, where they feel confident or where they've always felt confident. So there's sometimes some resistance, there's a digging in of the heels. So can you talk a little bit about like how do you navigate those situations? How do you get players on board to buy in?
I have to be 100% honest with guys. And again, I tell our guys from the moment they walk in the door, the first conversation that I had, first meeting I had with our new pitchers, and I do this in spring training. I remind guys that, and I'll use the Mount Everest analogy. I'm their guide. That if you are going to climb Mount Everest, would you want a guide who's going to BS you, who's going to say, "Oh yeah, go ahead, go over here. Yeah, it's okay," and they have no idea. They're just making it up. When one wrong step and you could fall to your death. So I'm going to be fully honest with guys that here's why we think you need to make this change, and also there's elements of trust. Okay, the development of trust has to go into this. Some guys, when they walk in the door, will trust me implicitly because I'm the director of pitching for the Atlanta Braves. Some guys, that trust is going to take time to develop. I'm going to have to show them that I know and we know what we're talking about. But so I try to start out by letting guys understand that when myself or my assistant Bo Henning, when we ask you, when we come to you with changes, this isn't on a whim. We have a vast number of resources, technology and people, a lot of smart people that can help us. And so we're doing it with the interest of, and again, we are very explicit. Our goal is to help you become a championship pitcher. Your dream is to be a major league pitcher and to be that guy holding up a trophy and dousing your teammates with champagne. I want to help you reach that dream. So, I try to approach it from that perspective. But it really is about trying to develop that trust. And at times, like in any relationship, and again, I'm not with them on a daily basis. Um, they know, okay, I'm the director of pitching, and then I show up, and they will know that, yeah, that something, and sometimes it may be that we have to get on a call like this with guys and say, okay, here's what we've noticed. We need to try and make an adjustment, but it is a process. It's a continual process of trying to develop trust, um, maintain that trust, and get guys to understand that it's a partnership. Um, I want the best for them throughout their career, and also this is very explicit that they don't have an unlimited amount of time to try to reach this goal.
Yeah.
That to become a major league player, this is something, probably it's in your 20s. If you have an opportunity to continue to pitch and play after age 30, that's fantastic. There aren't that many guys that get to do that. And so we have a limited amount of time to help you achieve your dream.
Right. Have you, Paul, I'm just curious, has there ever been a scenario in your career where a pitcher was resistant? They kind of dug their heels in. Um, Maybe not the entire scope of what you're asking them to do, but on particular things, and then they still make it. Like they kind of ignore the guide at times, and yet they still climb Everest.
Yeah, there's certain things, and again, sometimes there's nuance to it. Like if you have a pitcher who's in AAA and he's on the 40-man roster, he's been optioned, young guy. Um, there are things that we can look at and say, okay, for you to really be the best version of you, we really think that you need to throw this pitch, or you need to throw it harder, or you need to make it break more, or we've got to do a better job in throwing first pitch strikes, some of these things, and here's how we think you can do that. And this is one of the things that we deal with. That look, it's 2025. People can find all kinds of information out there from various sources that may conflict with what we think.
Mhm.
And so there are times where we just have to say, okay, again, in the interest of this relationship that we have and we need to have, and that's where I alluded earlier. At times, I have to understand I need to give this guy some space,
Mm.
and sometimes we know, and there's certain sometimes mostly younger guys, I think, but you need to let them fail. It's no different than parenting. You need to give your kids, when your kids become, and I have two sons that are about to be 34 and 29. And when they were in high school and college, there's things that, they would do that, as an adult, you'd kind of look at and think, this may not turn out all that well,
Mhm.
but they're going to have to do it. And you hope that they learn from it. And so I tend to view coaching and leading, and there's plenty of research books, articles, et cetera, that have compared parenting, is leading.
Mhm.
And I use that. I do look at a lot of these guys as if, they were my son. Um, okay, what would I do? And so, and just my nature is I'm not gonna try and beat guys over the head with things. Um, but yeah, there's times where you'd like, or we can envision that, hey, if this guy could do this, man, he would be better. But it's just not possible. And that's where I think also it gets to the art and the science. That all the information and the science can point to, this is really what he should do. But yet they're not video game avatars or robots, and we have to give guys time to make some mistakes and learn on their own and mature, for
Yeah.
lack of a better word.
Yeah, no, I mean it makes a ton of sense, and especially you compare it to parenting. And I always say, some listeners here will laugh when they hear me say this, but like you can kind of explain anything in a 2x2 framework. And so if you balance like the demands with the support, that's
Mm-hmm.
what we talk about, right? Is like, hey, here are some things that we really think are going to help you, that we'd really like to see you do. Like those are the demands, but you got to balance it with support, and there are going to be times when there's give and take in either direction. So yeah, that stuff is pretty fascinating, Paul. I got one more question here for you, and this is, I'm just curious to get your thoughts on this. The future of pitching and pitching development, where do you see it going in the next 5 or 10 years? And I guess what I'm asking, there's probably going to be some, let's say, some old school like baseball purists here. Is the pendulum ever going to swing back in a direction, especially now, like I think modern day baseball, and you see plenty of this, you hear this talked about a ton, but arm injuries, chasing velocity and metrics and analytics and all that kind of stuff. Is the pendulum ever going to swing back? Are we going to get old school 1980s, 1990s, pitching ever again, where it's just deception and movement, and it's not so much just about velocity? Are we going to get starting pitching back to going, 7, 8, 9 innings on a regular basis? Just give me some thoughts on that.
Ooh, okay. So
Did
arm
I
injuries.
open up a can of worms there, Paul?
Yeah, I tend to view myself as a baseball historian. I've loved the game. I, have plenty of time in the off seasons to look at some of these things. Pitchers have always been hurt. Okay, they always have.
Mhm.
Before Dr. Job came up with Tommy John surgery, if you tore your UCL, in which most likely a whole lot of guys did tear their UCL. We didn't have MRI machines to be able to see it, but plenty of guys hurt their elbow, they hurt their shoulder. Um, their career probably was just over. Okay. Um, or some of them could reinvent themselves from a hard thrower into a crafty guy. And as far as throwing hard, just watch a video of Bob Feller, Nolan Ryan, um, Sam McDowell, okay, Vida Blue, and tell me that these guys were not trying to throw hard,
Yeah.
because they were.
Right.
Now, the strike zone, as I mentioned, the game has not changed as far as three balls, or sorry, three strikes, four balls, and what hitters are swinging a wooden bat trying to hit a round baseball. But the strike zone has changed. I have videos on my phone that I show people all the time, whether it's Jim Palmer facing Willie Stargell in the 1971 World Series, and Palmer throws a pitch that's 6 inches off the plate, and it's called a strike. Um, Greg Maddux throwing pitches to Eddie Perez that are 6 inches off the plate, called a strike. So when pitchers could get pitches that were called a strike that far off the plate, you could throw what I would call your B fastball.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when the strike zone is pretty much the width of the plate, let's call it 18 inches, plate 17, but pitch can nick an edge or whatever. by definition, I have to throw the ball closer to the center of the strike zone.
Mhm.
So if I'm going to have to throw it closer to the center of the strike zone, where hitters do the most damage, and they always have and they always will, I have to throw my A fastball more often. Okay. Or it's almost like now in the game, you know, 30 years ago, whatever, 40 years ago, if the count was 2-0, okay, I got to throw it closer to the center. So I got to, I mean, this is one of the things that I was taught 2-0, 3-1, you better throw your best fastball. Okay. Essentially, that's what the count is for pitchers all the time. Okay. Um, so I, I think pitchers will continue, to throw hard because the strike zone we're not going back. I don't see it. Um, I don't know how we'd widen home plate. Um, the strike zone it's not going back to that massive zone that you would see, in those eras. Now, as far as pitchers, starting pitchers, going into the seventh and eighth all the time, I don't think you'll see that, simply because, we have information as far as, and this is just how the game works. If I face you for the first time in a game, I probably have the upper hand. Okay. But now once you see me, okay, you gain a little more information. And on a given day, like, okay, what my fastball is doing, how hard it is, what are the lighting conditions, all these things, right? What are my breaking pitches doing? By the time I face you the third time, you have, as a hitter, much more information.
Yeah.
The fourth time,
the tip a
yeah,
little more towards the hitter.
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the great pitchers, those guys didn't have as big of a separation. The great pitchers of history, and you can look this information up. There, the third time they faced a guy, there was not a tremendous difference. With the average major league starter, that third time, the hitters have much more of an advantage. Okay. And teams know this. And now roster rules have changed. In the 1974 Oakland A's, okay, it was their third World Series in a row. They used 11 pitchers the whole season, Cory. Jeez. 11. That's not going to happen again. Okay. No. And basically 9 of them were the ones that pitched.
I'm pretty sure the Braves have used 12 starters this year. Just starters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So now will there be some things that can change? I think we will continue to get better. I personally believe that, there are some things in how we train pitchers, and physically some things that we could do that could improve health, longevity, recovery, etc. That may be closer to what, old school looks like. But it is that blend of art and science. And, I think some of it is simply, there is a psychology to it. It's just like when the 4-minute mile barrier was broken. Okay. Everybody knew now, oh, wow, you can run faster than 4 minutes.
In a year or two, 20 other people broke the 4.
Yeah. And I think some of that has happened with velocity, that, okay, once a couple guys, 95 used to be, oh my gosh, wow, this guy, he threw 95. Well, then that barrier was broken. Now, 100. And it's no different than a lot of sports, again, whether it's golf, swimming, tennis, whatever it is, the 100. I just read an article the other day about, in the 100 meters, the number of teenagers now that are breaking 10 seconds in the 100 meters, it's just falling by the wayside.
Yeah.
So I think, again, it's just a blend of art and science, and, understanding that, yes, we have a lot of technology, but it's still humans that are playing the game. And when the rules change slightly, it changes the task. And that's how I look at it.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate it, Paul. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. A guy who obviously has been around and knows a lot about the game. So, look, I'll let you get out of here, man. But thanks so much for your time. Some great insights. I appreciate the conversation. I think our listeners are going to be able to take a lot from the conversation, especially um, our listeners who are baseball fans. I'm sure we'll eat this up. So, again, Paul, appreciate you, man. Thanks for your time today.
Well, thank you, Cory. I enjoyed doing it.